James Hartley had learned to appreciate the unexpected during his 4 months on Luminara. The planet itself was a study in constant surprise, gardens that glowed with magnetic responsiveness, architecture that hummed with frequencies just at the edge of human hearing, and a sky that shifted through 17 distinct color phases during each rotation cycle. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. The state dinner celebrating the successful trade negotiations had been going well. 3 months of careful diplomacy, endless protocol meetings, and delicate cultural navigation had finally produced results. Human-Luminari trade relations were officially established, marking the first formal economic partnership between the two species. James should have been satisfied. Instead, he found himself on a private balcony, watching the bioluminescent gardens pulse with living light, while his mind wandered to matters decidedly not diplomatic. "You seem distant for someone whose mission has succeeded." The voice belonged to Counselor Amara, who had joined him on the balcony with the quiet grace that characterized her species. The Luminari moved like they were part of the wind itself, fluid and naturally elegant in ways that always made James feel slightly clumsy by comparison. "Just taking it in," he said, gesturing to the gardens below. "4 months here and I'm still amazed by this view." Amara moved to stand beside him at the railing, her elongated ears orienting slightly toward the garden, as if listening to frequencies he couldn't detect. In the soft glow from the plants below, her features were illuminated in ways that caught his attention. Her eyes particularly. He'd noticed them before, of course. How could he not? They were remarkable even by Luminari standards, deep amber with flecks of violet that seemed to shift depending on the light source. Right now, with the garden's glow painting everything in soft blues and greens, her eyes captured and reflected the colors like living prisms. "Your eyes are beautiful," he said before he could think better of it. The words hung in the air between them, and James immediately felt diplomatic alarm bells ringing in his head. Complimenting a high-ranking official's appearance during a state function was probably breach of some protocol he hadn't learned yet. He opened his mouth to apologize or qualify the statement, but Amara's reaction stopped him. Instead of the polite acknowledgement he expected, or worse, offense at his forwardness, her expression shifted into something he'd never seen on her composed features before. It was playful, almost mischievous, with a warmth that transformed her dignified bearing into something more approachable. "Thank you, James," she said, and he noticed she used his first name rather than his diplomatic title. "But I have something even prettier. Want to see?" The question left him momentarily speechless. His mind raced through possibilities. Was this a cultural tradition he'd missed in his studies? A test of his diplomatic composure? Some kind of invitation that he wasn't sure how to interpret? Amara seemed to read his confusion clearly, because her expression softened with understanding. "It's nothing improper, I assure you. Simply something my species doesn't often share with outsiders. A gift of trust, if you're willing to receive it." "A gift of trust. We've worked together for 4 months now, James. I've watched you navigate our cultural complexities with genuine respect rather than mere diplomatic obligation. Your compliment just now, it was honest. I could hear no calculation in your words, no attempt to flatter for advantage. Just sincere appreciation." Her ears twitched slightly, a gesture he'd learned indicated emotional significance. "Such honesty is rare, and it makes me want to share something authentic in return." James considered the offer. Every diplomatic instinct told him to politely decline, to maintain professional boundaries, to avoid any situation that might compromise his position. But something in Amara's expression, an openness he'd never seen her display in official settings, made him curious in ways that transcended professional considerations. "I'm honored by your trust, Counselor," he said carefully. "If you're willing to share, I'm willing to see." "Good." Her smile widened and she gestured toward the balcony door. "Follow me, but please call me Amara. What I'm about to show you doesn't exist within diplomatic titles." She led him back through the dinner gathering, and James noticed how her passage created ripples of attention. Other luminari turned to watch her go, their elegant features showing subtle signs of curiosity or concern. Several made eye contact with James, and he couldn't quite interpret their expressions. They left the main hall through a side corridor, entering sections of the palace he'd never seen during official visits. The architecture shifted as they went deeper, less formal grandeur, more intimate design. The crystalline walls hummed with lower frequencies here, creating ambient sounds that were almost melodic. Guards nodded respectfully as they passed, but James noticed a few exchanging glances that suggested they found this escort unusual. He wondered if he was walking into something he didn't fully understand. "You're nervous," Amara observed without turning around. "How can you tell? Your breathing has become more shallow, and your footsteps have changed rhythm. My ears can detect subtle frequency shifts in biological responses." She glanced back at him with a reassuring smile. "It's natural to be uncertain. What I'm about to show you is significant. You're making me more nervous, not less." She laughed softly, a sound that carried melodic undertones unique to luminari vocalizations. "Fair point. Let me reassure you, nothing I show you will compromise your position or violate any standards of propriety by either of our species' norms. It's simply a truth about luminari that we keep private, a vulnerability we don't share lightly." They descended several levels, the corridors growing quieter and more secluded. Finally, Amara stopped before a door that looked unremarkable but clearly held significance based on her pause. "This is my private meditation chamber," she explained. "One of the few places in the palace designed for complete darkness. What I want to show you requires absence of light to be fully visible." She opened the door, and James stepped into darkness so complete that it felt tangible. The room's walls must have been designed to absorb every photon, because even with the corridor light behind them, the darkness seemed to swallow everything. "Wait here," Amara said, and he heard her move past him into the space. "I need to prepare. Close your eyes and keep them closed until I tell you otherwise." Closed eyes in complete darkness. There's a difference between darkness observed and darkness ignored. Trust me. James closed his eyes, feeling somewhat foolish standing in absolute darkness with his eyes shut. He heard soft sounds of movement, fabric shifting, careful footsteps, then silence. His heart rate increased as the seconds stretched. What was she preparing? What could possibly require this level of ceremony? "Open your eyes," Amara's voice came from somewhere ahead of him, soft but clear in the absolute silence. James opened his eyes, and what he saw made him forget to breathe. Amara stood in the center of the room, and her skin had become a living canvas of light. Patterns of bioluminescence pulsed across every visible surface of her body, her arms, her neck, her face, her hands. The light emanated from within her skin itself, creating intricate designs that moved and shifted like aurora borealis captured in flesh. The colors were extraordinary, deep violets bleeding into electric blues, soft greens transitioning to warm golds, occasional flashes of silver that appeared like stars in the flowing patterns. But what made the display truly remarkable was its movement. The patterns weren't static. They flowed across her skin in waves that seemed to respond to something internal, creating visual music that he could almost hear. "My people's hidden language," Amara said softly, and her voice now carried accompaniment. Her patterns rippled in response to her words, emphasizing emotions he could suddenly see. "This is how we truly communicate." James stared, unable to form words. The beauty of what he was witnessing transcended anything he'd imagined when she'd made her offer on the balcony. Her eyes had been beautiful, yes. But this was something else entirely. "I don't." He started, then stopped, his diplomatic vocabulary failing him completely. Amara smiled, and the patterns on her skin brightened with warm golds that he somehow knew represented pleasure in his reaction. "Take your time. I know it's overwhelming." Overwhelming doesn't begin to cover it, James managed. I've never seen anything like this in my life. No human has, not for centuries. We keep this hidden, James. Carefully hidden. The patterns shifted to cooler blues, calm but cautious. What you're seeing is our emotional truth made visible. These patterns respond to everything I feel, every thought, every intention. I cannot hide from you now. Every emotion I experience will display itself. That's incredibly vulnerable. Yes. The patterns confirmed her acknowledgement, showing trust in soft blue waves mixed with nervous orange flickers at the edges. Which is why we only show this to those we trust completely, and why I'm showing you. James watched the patterns shift and flow, mesmerized. Why me? Why trust a human diplomat you've only known for months? The patterns changed again, thoughtful purples mixing with decisive golds. Because you saw my eyes and called them beautiful without wanting anything from me. Because you've spent 4 months respecting our culture instead of tolerating it. Because when you complimented me just now, my ears heard nothing but genuine appreciation in your frequency. No calculation, no diplomatic maneuvering, just honest human emotion. She stepped closer, and the patterns responded to the proximity, new colors emerging at the edges, soft pinks that he intuitively understood represented affection. Not romantic necessarily, but genuine warmth toward another being. Your species communicates through words and subtle expressions, Amara continued. Mine communicates through this light that cannot lie. I wanted you to see my truth, James. To understand that when I say I trust you, this is what trust looks like for my people. James found himself emotionally overwhelmed, in ways he hadn't experienced since childhood. The vulnerability she was displaying, the complete honesty of seeing someone's emotions written in light across their skin. It was intimate beyond anything he'd understood intimacy to be. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, he said, and meant it more deeply than any diplomatic compliment he'd ever given. Her patterns flared into pleased brightness, golds and silvers mixing with happy warmth that made him smile in response. She laughed again, and seeing her joy displayed visually while hearing it vocally created a synesthetic experience that touched something deep in his consciousness. There, she said softly, now you've seen my truth. The question becomes, what will you do with this knowledge? James understood the weight of what she was asking. She'd shown him a vulnerability that could be exploited. If humans knew that Luminari hid emotional truth beneath composed exteriors, that darkness revealed their real feelings, that advantage could be weaponized in negotiations. He also understood that his answer mattered more than any diplomatic response he'd ever given. I'll honor it, he said simply. Whatever you need me to do with this knowledge to protect your people, I'll do it. This gift you've given me, it's too beautiful to betray. Amara's patterns shifted into something he could only describe as profound relief mixed with deep appreciation. The colors softened into gentle blues and warm golds, creating a display of emotional peace that felt like watching someone's soul exhale after holding its breath. Thank you, she whispered, and her patterns confirmed the depth of her gratitude. Thank you for being worthy of what I hoped you would be. They stood together in the darkness, her light the only illumination, and James knew that everything about his understanding of the Luminari, and perhaps of beauty itself, had just fundamentally changed. Because her eyes had been beautiful, yes, but this living truth of who she was beneath her surface, this was prettier than anything he'd ever imagined existed. James didn't sleep that night. How could he? Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Amara's patterns, that living aurora of emotion displayed across her skin in colors that spoke louder than any words. He lay in his diplomatic quarters, staring at the ceiling that glowed softly with Luminari ambient lighting, and tried to process what he'd witnessed. She'd shown him something sacred, something her entire species kept hidden from outsiders. And now he carried that knowledge like a precious weight he wasn't sure he deserved to bear. When morning came, or what passed for morning on a planet with 17 daily color phases. He forced himself through his usual routine. Shower, dress in diplomatic attire, review the day's schedule. Normal activities that felt profoundly disconnected from the paradigm shift happening in his mind. His schedule showed a cultural exchange meeting with Counselor Amara. His stomach did something complicated at the sight of her name. The meeting room was standard Luminari design. Crystalline walls that could adjust transparency, comfortable seating arranged in circular patterns that promoted equality, and lighting calibrated to be pleasant for both human and Luminari eyes. Lighting that was anything but dark. Amara arrived precisely on time, her bearing as composed and dignified as ever. She wore formal council robes, her elongated ears adorned with subtle status markers, her expression professionally pleasant. Nothing about her appearance suggested the vulnerability she'd shown him hours ago. But now James knew what existed beneath that composed surface. He knew that somewhere under that ordinary-looking skin, patterns of emotion were constantly flowing, expressing truths that the lighting kept hidden. "Good morning, Ambassador Hartley," she said formally as she took her seat. "I trust you rested well after the celebration." Ambassador Hartley, not James, he understood immediately. They were back to professional roles. What had happened in her meditation chamber existed separately from their diplomatic duties. "Good morning, Counselor Amara. Yes, thank you. The celebration was quite memorable." He kept his tone neutral, but he saw the slightest flicker in her expression, acknowledgement that his choice of memorable carried layers of meaning. They conducted their meeting professionally, discussing cultural exchange protocols and reviewing upcoming diplomatic events. James found himself hyper-aware of every small gesture she made, every shift in her posture, every variation in her voice. Before last night, he'd have interpreted these cues through standard diplomatic analysis. Now he found himself wondering what patterns were flowing beneath her skin with each change. Was she nervous, pleased, regretting her decision to show him? The inability to know, when he'd so recently been able to see, felt like a unique kind of blindness. After the meeting concluded, as other attendees filed out, Amara lingered. When they were alone, her formal bearing softened slightly. "You seem distracted today," she observed quietly. "I have a lot to process." "Do you regret what you saw?" Not for a second. The certainty in his voice surprised even him. I'm struggling with what to do with the knowledge, how to hold it responsibly." Amara nodded, her expression thoughtful. "That struggle itself honors the gift. If you weren't wrestling with its weight, I'd be concerned. Can we?" He hesitated, unsure how to phrase the request. "Can we talk about it? Not officially, not diplomatically, but as whatever we are now, because I'm not sure what category we fit into." Her lips curved into that slight smile that had become familiar. "We're friends who share an unusual understanding, James. And yes, we can talk. Come to the Eastern Gardens during the second color phase. They're designed for private conversations. Aren't people going to notice us spending time together outside official functions? Let them notice. Friendship between diplomats isn't forbidden, merely unusual. And I find I don't particularly care about usual anymore." She left before he could respond, and James spent the rest of his day counting down to the second color phase. The Eastern Gardens were indeed designed for privacy, winding paths between tall hedges of bioluminescent plants that created natural sound barriers. The plants themselves pulsed with soft blue light, responding to the magnetic field fluctuations that characterized this particular time phase. Amara was waiting on a bench made from living crystal that grew directly from the ground. She changed from her formal robes into something simpler, still elegant by Luminari standards, but less official. Her ears were bare of status markers. "Thank you for coming," she said as he sat beside her. "Thank you for inviting me. I have about 1,000 questions." "I expected you might." Her ears oriented toward him with attention that felt more focused than mere listening. "Ask what you need to know." James had spent hours organizing his questions. Now sitting beside her with the blue glowing plants creating their own gentle illumination, everything he'd planned seemed inadequate. "Why hide it?" he finally asked. "The bioluminescence, it's so beautiful, so honest. Why keep it secret?" Amara was quiet for a moment, her gaze distant. "Because beauty and honesty, when they cannot be controlled, become vulnerabilities. In our ancient history, before we learned to hide our patterns, we were easily manipulated. Enemies could see our fears, rivals could exploit our weaknesses, predators could sense our vulnerabilities. So you evolved the ability to hide. We evolved light reactive cells that camouflage the patterns in normal lighting. Natural selection favored those who could conceal their emotions." She paused. "Though perhaps favored is a complex term. We survived, yes, but at the cost of an entire language of honesty that we now only share with intimates." "That's tragic in a way." "Is it? Your species hides emotions through facial control and careful word choice. We hide them through lighting conditions. Both methods achieve the same result, the ability to interact without full vulnerability." James considered this, "But you chose to show me. Why?" Amara turned to face him fully, and even in the ambient garden glow, he could see the consideration in her expression. "Do you remember what I said about hearing no calculation in your compliment? That your words carried genuine frequency rather than diplomatic intent?" "Yes, James, I interact with diplomats constantly. Every species we've encountered brings representatives trained in careful communication. They say what they mean to achieve, not what they actually think." Her ears did that emotional significance twitch. "But you said my eyes were beautiful because you found them beautiful, not to flatter, not to create advantage, just because you saw something that pleased you and chose to express that honestly." "That's a very human thing," James said. "Commenting on what we find attractive without always calculating the implications." "Exactly. And that humanness, that willingness to be emotionally honest even when it might not serve strategic purpose, that's rare and valuable to someone like me." She gestured to the garden around them. "I spend my life in calculated interactions, every word measured, every gesture planned, every emotion hidden beneath composed surfaces. Your simple, honest compliment reminded me that communication can be genuine rather than strategic. So you showed me your patterns to demonstrate what genuine communication looks like for your species." "Partly, but also because I wanted you to see me. Not Counselor Amara, the composed diplomat, not the high-ranking official with perfect bearing. Me, the person beneath all the careful concealment." James felt the weight of that trust settle more heavily on his shoulders. "That's a profound gift, Amara. I'm not sure I've done anything to deserve it. You were honest when you didn't need to be. That's surprisingly rare." She stood, moving to one of the bioluminescent hedges and touching its glowing surface gently. "Can I show you something else? There's Luminari technology is built on bioluminescent principles," she explained. "Our plants, our architecture, our systems, they all respond to our patterns when we allow them to. This is how we truly interface with our world, through emotional and intentional frequencies that create physical responses. That's incredible. It's normal for us. The abnormal thing is having to hide it constantly when interacting with outsiders." She withdrew her hand, and the plant returned to uniform glow. "Every meeting with human delegates, every negotiation, every diplomatic function, I must consciously suppress my natural way of communicating. It's exhausting." James began to understand something that hadn't occurred to him before. "All those meetings we've had over the past 4 months, you've been essentially operating with half your communication ability disabled. More than half. My patterns convey nuances that words cannot capture. Imagine if every conversation you had, you could only use basic vocabulary and no facial expressions. That's what every diplomatic interaction feels like to me. I had no idea. How could you? Humans don't know what we're missing, and we've become expert at appearing complete in limited lighting." She returned to the bench, sitting beside him with her usual grace. "But with you now, I want you to know, because understanding our limitation might help you understand why I showed you my truth. You wanted to fully communicate with someone, even once. Yes. And you were safe enough to take that risk with." Her expression grew serious. "James, what I've told you today, what I showed you last night, this information could change human-luminary relations dramatically if shared. Knowing that we hide emotional truth beneath composed surfaces gives your species significant advantage in negotiations. I won't share it. I know. I heard that truth in your voice last night when you promised to honor the gift. Your frequency carried no deception." She reached out and touched his hand briefly, a gesture that felt intimate by luminary standards. "But I wanted you to understand the full weight of what you carry. This isn't just about keeping a secret. It's about choosing to limit your species' advantage out of respect for mine. It's not a hard choice. What you've shown me, it's too beautiful to weaponize." Amara's ears twitched in that emotional significance way, and James wished desperately that he could see her patterns in this moment. What colors would trust and gratitude create? What patterns would appreciation form? "You keep using the word beautiful," she said softly. "Is that how humans process what they value, through aesthetic appreciation?" "Partly, but when I say your patterns are beautiful, I don't just mean visually. They're beautiful because they're honest, because they show someone's truth without possibility of deception, because seeing them meant seeing you completely. That's a profound definition of beauty. It's the one your gift taught me." They sat together in the garden as the color phase shifted, blue light transitioning slowly to violet as the planet's magnetic fields fluctuated. The plants around them responded to the change, their patterns adjusting, and James felt he could almost understand their language now. "I want to learn more," he said eventually. "About your patterns, your culture, the way you communicate when you're not hiding. Would you teach me?" Amara considered the request, her expression thoughtful. "Learning to read luminary patterns is difficult for species without our visual receptors. You'd see the colors but miss many subtleties. I'd still see more than I do now. And maybe understanding, even partially, would help me be a better diplomat for your people. You'd be the first human to study our hidden language. It would require regular sessions in darkness, seeing my patterns repeatedly as I explain them. Essentially, I'd be vulnerable with you consistently rather than just once." "Is that a no?" "It's a consideration." She stood again, but this time she extended her hand to him, a human gesture she'd learned. "Come with me. I want to show you something that will help you understand what you're asking." James took her hand, and they walked together through the garden paths until they reached a structure he hadn't noticed before, a small building that appeared to be made of material that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. "This is a pattern-speaking chamber," Amara explained, "used by luminary couples for intimate communication. The complete darkness inside allows patterns to be fully visible while the sound-absorbing walls ensure privacy." "Couples use these?" "Yes. When two luminari commit to partnership, they commit to seeing each other's patterns through all emotional states: joy and anger, peace and turmoil, love and frustration. To be truly partnered means accepting someone's complete emotional truth." She opened the door, and darkness spilled out like tangible presence. "Step inside," she invited. "Let me show you what communication looks like when nothing is hidden." James stepped into the darkness, and after a moment, Amara followed, closing the door behind them. The darkness was absolute. Then, slowly, her patterns emerged. But this time, instead of the controlled display he'd seen last night, she showed him range. Fear first, orange and red patterns that flickered anxiously. Then joy, brilliant golds and yellows that burst across her skin like sunbursts. Sadness, deep blues that flowed slowly, heavily. Anger, sharp reds and harsh purples that moved in aggressive patterns. "This is what I look like when I feel," she said, and her voice carried the emotions her patterns displayed. Not composed, not controlled, just true. James watched as she cycled through emotional states, each one creating distinct visual signatures. He saw love in soft pinks that swirled gently. He saw determination in steady silvers that pulsed with purpose. He saw hope in light greens that reached upward like growing things. "If you learn to read this language," Amara said, her patterns settling into contemplative purples, "you'll see things I can't hide from you. You'll know when I'm struggling, when I'm uncertain, when I'm not as confident as I appear. You'll see me without any protection. That's what I want to understand. All of you, not just the composed diplomat." Her patterns shifted to those soft trust blues he'd seen before, mixed with surprised golds. "You humans are remarkably brave about vulnerability. You choose connection even when it means being seen imperfectly. Maybe that's why your compliment meant so much. You're used to protection, and I offered honest appreciation of something visible. You wanted to show me what honest appreciation looks like for something hidden. You understand more than you realize." Her patterns brightened with pleased warmth. "Yes, James, I'll teach you to read our language. I'll show you my patterns regularly so you can learn their meanings. I'll be vulnerable with you in ways I've never been with an outsider." "Why?" "Because you called my eyes beautiful without wanting anything from me, and now you want to learn my true language without wanting to use it against me." That combination of honest appreciation and respectful curiosity, that's rare enough to be precious. Standing in complete darkness with her patterns providing the only illumination, James understood that his simple compliment had opened a door to something neither of them had anticipated. Not romance, not diplomatic advantage, but genuine connection between two people from different species who wanted to understand each other completely. "When do we start?" he asked. Her patterns flared with eager golds. "We already have." The next 2 weeks established a routine that James came to anticipate with increasing eagerness. Official diplomatic duties during normal hours, followed by evening sessions in Amara's pattern-speaking chamber, where she taught him the language of her species' hidden truth. He learned that fear patterns moved in sharp, quick jolts, while anxiety created slower, more persistent waves. He learned that joy expressed differently depending on its source. Humor created bright bursts while deep contentment spread like warm tide. He learned that anger had variations. Righteous anger pulsed steadily, while frustrated anger flickered chaotically. Most importantly, he learned to read Amara herself with increasing accuracy. He saw her frustration when diplomatic meetings went poorly, her patterns showing agitated oranges even while her face remained composed. He saw her genuine pleasure when he made progress in understanding her language, warm gold spreading across her skin like sunrise. He saw her occasional sadness about the isolation her position required, deep blues that pooled in the patterns around her heart area. "You're getting better at this," Amara observed one evening as they sat in the darkened chamber. Her patterns showed pleased satisfaction mixed with something he'd learned to recognize as affectionate warmth. "I have a good teacher, though I'm sure I'm still missing nuances." "Probably. But you're seeing enough to understand far more than any human has before." Her patterns shifted thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about something." "What?" "Whether this knowledge, your growing understanding of our emotional language, might serve larger purpose beyond our private sessions." James felt a flicker of concern. "I promise not to share what you've shown me. Not sharing isn't the same as not using." Her patterns cycled through consideration, purples mixing with decisive golds. "James, you've observed that luminari often seem cold or calculating to human diplomats, yes? It's been noted in cultural studies. And you now know why. We hide our emotional truth, so what humans see is our protective surface. Meanwhile, human emotional expressions seem erratic to us because we're accustomed to the consistency of pattern-based communication." "You're saying there's mutual misunderstanding." "Significant mutual misunderstanding. Humans think we're hiding something deceptive. We think humans are emotionally unstable. Both assumptions are based on not understanding the other's emotional language." James considered this. And you think my understanding could help bridge that gap? I think your understanding could prevent serious miscommunication, particularly in high-stakes situations where misreading emotional intent could have consequences. Before he could respond, both their communicators chimed simultaneously, the priority signal that indicated urgent diplomatic matters. The message was concerning. A human mining corporation had proposed extraction operations on a Luminari world, and initial negotiations had broken down badly. Both sides were accusing the other of bad faith dealing, and what should have been routine resource negotiation had escalated into potential diplomatic incident. I need to attend to this, Amara said, her patterns shifting to worried oranges. The situation is deteriorating quickly. Can I help? She hesitated, patterns cycling through consideration. Actually, yes. You might be the only one who can. The emergency briefing was held in the main diplomatic chamber, lighting set to standard illumination that hid all luminary patterns beneath ordinary-seeming skin. James attended as human cultural liaison, observing as Amara and other luminary officials debated strategy. The problem became clear quickly. Human mining executives had interpreted luminary-composed responses as cold dismissal of legitimate requests. Luminary officials had interpreted human emotional appeals as manipulative attempts to create sympathy rather than engage in rational negotiation. Each side believed the other was being deliberately difficult. James saw the miscommunication pattern immediately. The humans expected emotional engagement that the Luminari weren't displaying. The Luminari expected logical consistency that human emotional arguments seemed to contradict. He requested private audience with Amara after the briefing. "I see what's happening," he said once they were alone. "The humans think your officials don't care about finding compromise because they're not showing emotional investment. The Luminari think the humans are being manipulative because their emotional appeals seem inconsistent with logical negotiation. We do care, deeply, but our caring doesn't show in lighting that hides our patterns. That's exactly the problem, and without understanding, both sides are spiraling into mutual suspicion." Amara's expression grew thoughtful. "What do you suggest?" "Something radical." He took a breath. "Show them." "Show them what?" "Your patterns. Show the human negotiators what luminary emotional truth looks like. Let them see that you're not cold or calculating, just communicating through a different language. Break the miscommunication by revealing what they're missing." Amara's reaction was immediate alarm. "James, that would require showing outsiders our vulnerability. Multiple outsiders. It's never been done." "I know, but consider what's at stake. This negotiation failure could damage human-luminary relations broadly. Your officials believe humans are acting in bad faith. Humans believe luminari are being obstructionist. Without intervention, both sides will walk away convinced the other can't be trusted." She paced, her bearing showing agitation that he wished he could see in pattern form. "What you're suggesting is unprecedented. I'd be revealing species vulnerability to people I have no reason to trust. You trusted me with it. You earned that trust through months of genuine respect and honest communication. Then let me help facilitate trust earning. I can explain what they're about to see, prepare them for the significance. And you wouldn't be showing them in private, you'd be showing them in controlled setting with purpose. Not vulnerability for intimacy's sake, but vulnerability for understanding's sake." Amara stopped pacing, considering his words. "You truly believe this could resolve the impasse?" "I believe it could transform it. Right now both sides are arguing about intentions they're misreading. If the humans could see your officials' actual emotional investment, the genuine concern, the desire for fair agreement, the frustration at being misunderstood, how could they continue believing you're acting in bad faith? And what about our security? If humans know we hide emotional truth, some humans already know me, and I've chosen to use that knowledge for understanding rather than advantage." He stepped closer, speaking with conviction. Amara, you showed me your patterns because you wanted genuine communication. What if that genuine communication could prevent a diplomatic disaster? What if your gift of trust to me could become a gift of understanding for both our species? She was quiet for a long moment, and James desperately wished he could see her patterns, could watch her process this impossible decision in colors that couldn't lie. Finally, she spoke. If I do this, if I show outsiders what I showed you, it has to be my choice made freely. Not because you've convinced me, but because I believe it's right. I wouldn't want it any other way. And you would need to be there. To explain, to translate, to help them understand what they're seeing. Could you do that? Serve as bridge between what I reveal and what they comprehend? Yes, absolutely. Then I need time to consider. This isn't a decision to be made quickly. Her expression was serious but not closed. I'll contact you when I've decided. She left, and James remained in the chamber, wondering if his suggestion had been wisdom or overreach. 2 days passed with no word from Amara. The mining negotiation continued deteriorating, accusations flying more freely as trust eroded further. James attended sessions as observer, watching both sides talk past each other, unable to intervene without Amara's permission. On the 3rd day, she summoned him to her private chamber. When he arrived, she was dressed formally, her bearing regal and composed. But when she spoke, her voice carried weight. I've decided. I'll do it. I'll show the human negotiators what our emotional truth looks like. James felt relief and concern in equal measure. You're sure? No, this terrifies me in ways I can't fully articulate. But I keep returning to what you said, that genuine communication prevented miscommunication between us. Perhaps it can do the same on larger scale. Her expression grew serious. There are conditions, however. Name them. First, I won't show strangers alone. You'll be there as translator of meaning. Second, I'll choose which patterns to display. This will be controlled vulnerability, not complete exposure. Third, if I sense the humans are preparing to use this knowledge exploitatively, I'll stop immediately. And fourth, she paused. Fourth, you'll help me explain afterwards. Help both sides understand what was shared and why. Agreed. All of it? Then we proceed. I've arranged for a special negotiation session tomorrow. I've told both sides that I have a proposal that might resolve their impasse, but I've given no details. Her bearing straightened with determination. Whatever happens tomorrow, James, understand that this moment began with your honest compliment about my eyes. You saw something beautiful in me and said so without calculation. That honesty opened a door that's led us here, to the possibility of understanding between our species that neither of us imagined when we started. For what it's worth, I think what you're about to do is incredibly brave. Brave or foolish, we'll see which proves true. But she almost smiled as she said it. Get some rest tonight. Tomorrow will be significant for both our peoples. James returned to his quarters, fully aware that his simple compliment about her eyes had set in motion events that could reshape interspecies relations. A small moment of honest appreciation, grown into possibility of genuine understanding. He hoped they were ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. The special negotiation session was held in a chamber James had never seen before, one specifically designed to allow complete lighting control. The walls were lined with material that absorbed ambient light entirely, and the illumination came from panels that could be adjusted with precision. Both delegations arrived with clear tension. Human mining executives on one side, faces showing frustration and skepticism. Luminary environmental officials on the other, composed as always but radiating coldness that James now recognized as protective reserve rather than actual indifference. Amara entered last, wearing her full ceremonial robes with all status crystals adorning her ears. She looked every inch the dignified counselor, and James was perhaps the only person in the room who knew the courage it took for her to be here. Thank you all for coming, she began, her voice carrying formal authority. I've called this session because I believe our negotiation impasse stems not from irreconcilable positions, but from fundamental miscommunication. Before we proceed, Ambassador Hartley will explain what I mean by that. James stood, feeling the weight of both delegations' attention. For the past 4 months, I've studied Luminari culture extensively. What I've learned has changed my understanding of how our species miscommunicate in ways that create unnecessary conflict. He saw skepticism on the human faces and careful neutrality on the Luminari ones. Humans expect emotional engagement in negotiations. We show investment through facial expressions, voice modulation, demonstrative gestures. When we don't see these cues from our Luminari counterparts, we interpret their composure as coldness or indifference. Several human executives nodded, confirming this perception. Luminari, meanwhile, expect logical consistency. They interpret our emotional demonstrations as instability or manipulation rather than genuine investment. Luminari officials showed subtle signs of agreement. Both interpretations are wrong. The truth is that our species communicate emotion through incompatible channels. Counselor Amara has offered to demonstrate what I mean through something her species almost never shares with outsiders. I need you all to understand the significance of what she's about to show you. He explained, carefully, about Luminari bioluminescence, the hidden emotional language written in light patterns beneath their skin. He described how normal lighting conceals these patterns, how darkness reveals them. He emphasized that seeing someone's patterns is considered deeply intimate, that Amara was offering vulnerability that her species guards carefully. The humans looked intrigued but uncertain. The Luminari officials showed subtle alarm. They hadn't been told Amara planned to reveal this secret. "I'm going to dim the lights," Amara said. "What you'll see is my emotional truth, displayed in patterns I cannot fake or control. Every feeling I have will be visible. I show you this not to gain advantage, but to help you understand that when we seem cold, we're actually feeling deeply, just expressing it in ways you haven't been able to see." She nodded to James, who moved to the lighting controls. "Ready?" he asked quietly. Her eyes met his, and he saw trust and fear mixed in their amber depths. "Do it." He dimmed the lights slowly. As darkness filled the chamber, Amara's patterns emerged. The gasps from both delegations were audible. Human executives leaned forward, their expressions shifting from skepticism to wonder. Even the Luminari officials, who knew about bioluminescence, seemed moved by seeing their counselor willingly reveal herself. Amara's patterns showed complex emotions, soft blues of peaceful intent, warm golds of genuine hope, but also nervous oranges at the edges that revealed her anxiety about this moment. Her patterns couldn't lie, and everyone could see that she was both committed to this revelation and frightened by it. "What you're seeing," James explained softly, "is her emotional truth. The blue patterns indicate her genuine desire for peaceful resolution. The gold represents hope that understanding is possible. The orange at the edges shows her concern about whether this will work." He watched the human executives' faces transform. They weren't just seeing light patterns, they were seeing someone's soul laid bare before them. One woman, who had been particularly aggressive in previous sessions, had tears forming in her eyes. "I can see she means it," the woman whispered. "There's no deception possible in something this honest." Amara's patterns brightened with pleased acknowledgement, and James translated, "That brightening means she's grateful you understand. She's pleased that you can see her truth." Another Luminari official stepped forward, a senior environmental advisor who had been particularly firm in rejecting the mining proposal. "Counselor, if I may." Amara nodded permission. The official moved to stand beside her in the darkness, and after a moment of visible internal struggle, allowed his own patterns to become visible. His display was different, deeper colors, more agitated patterns that showed genuine distress. "This is what I feel about our sacred sites," he said, his voice carrying emotion that his previous composed demeanor had hidden. "This fear you see, it's not economic calculation. It's spiritual concern for places that hold meaning our words haven't been able to convey." The human executives stared at the two luminari with their emotional truths on display. They saw patterns of genuine worry, authentic concern, real investment in outcomes. Everything they'd interpreted as cold indifference was revealed to be deep feeling carefully concealed by protective instinct. "You've been hiding this from us," one of the executives said slowly. "Not because you don't care, but because showing it makes you vulnerable." "Yes," Amara confirmed, and her patterns showed relieved acknowledgement that he understood. James decided to push further. "And you've been interpreting their emotional composure as deception, when really it's protection. Just as they've been interpreting your emotional displays as manipulation, when really it's genuine investment. Both sides care deeply, you're just expressing it in incompatible languages." Silence fell over the chamber as both delegations absorbed this revelation. Then, something remarkable happened. The humans learned that specific sites held spiritual significance that transcended economic value. They saw patterns of sacred connection in the officials' displays that made clear this wasn't strategic positioning, but genuine cultural importance. The luminari learned that human emotional appeals came from real concern, patterns of worry about sick people who needed medical technology, genuine distress about shortages that would cause suffering. Human emotion, they realized, wasn't instability but investment. By the end of the session, a framework agreement had emerged. Alternative mining sites that met human needs without violating luminary sacred spaces. Cultural preservation guarantees. Joint oversight committees. Solutions that had seemed impossible when neither side understood the other suddenly became achievable when they could see each other's truth. As lights gradually returned to normal and luminary patterns became invisible again, something had permanently changed. Both delegations had witnessed emotional honesty that transcended words, and that witnessing had created understanding that purely verbal negotiation never achieved. The executives left with changed perspectives. Several sought out James privately afterward, asking questions about what they'd witnessed, expressing gratitude for the bridge of understanding he'd helped build. James found Amara in the gardens afterward, where bioluminescent plants pulsed softly in the evening light. She'd removed her formal robes and status crystals, appearing more casual than he'd ever seen her in public. "How do you feel?" he asked, joining her on a bench. "Exhausted, relieved, terrified about implications, proud that it worked." She smiled tiredly, "And grateful to you for suggesting this impossible thing, for being bridge between what we revealed and what they understood. You did the hard part. You chose to be vulnerable with strangers. Because you showed me that vulnerability could create understanding, rather than exploitation." She turned to face him fully. "James, do you realize what we've accomplished today? This isn't just about one mining negotiation. This is precedent. First time luminari have willingly shown emotional truth to outsiders. First time humans have seen our hidden language. First time understanding was built through visual emotional honesty rather than just words. It feels significant. It is significant. And it started because you complimented my eyes honestly." Her expression grew soft. "You saw something beautiful in me and said so without wanting anything. That honesty opened door to deeper sharing, which created understanding, which now might reshape how our species relate." That's a lot to attribute to calling your eyes beautiful. But it's true, small moments of genuine honesty can cascade into enormous change. She touched his hand briefly. "I have something for you, a gift." From her robes, she produced a small device that looked like a flat stone with intricate patterns etched into its surface. "This is a pattern-speaking key. It grants access to any pattern-speaking chamber in luminary space. It's given only to those considered trusted enough to see our emotional truth." She pressed it into his palm. You've earned this. Through respect, through honesty, through choosing to use knowledge for understanding rather than advantage. James felt the weight of the gift, both physical and symbolic. Amara, I don't know what to say. Say you'll continue being bridge between our peoples. Say you'll help others understand what you've learned about our emotional language. Say you'll keep seeing beauty and truth, rather than just appearance. I'll do all of that. Good. She stood, her bearing relaxed but purposeful. Tomorrow, reports of today's success will spread. Both our governments will want to know how we achieved breakthrough. There will be questions, attention, implications to navigate. Sounds complicated. It will be, but also important. We've demonstrated that understanding between species is possible when we choose honesty over protection. She smiled, and it all started because you called my eyes beautiful. James looked at her, at the woman who'd shown him that beauty meant far more than appearance. Her eyes were still beautiful, yes, with their amber depths and shifting colors. But now he saw the complete picture. The courage behind those eyes, the wisdom in her choices, the strength required to be vulnerable. Your eyes are still beautiful, he said. But you were right. What you showed me was prettier. Not the patterns themselves, but what they represented. Truth, trust, the courage to be seen completely. Her expression softened with genuine warmth. That's what beauty actually means to my people, James. Not static appearance, but living truth of what someone is beneath their surface. You've learned to see that kind of beauty now. You taught me. We taught each other. She extended her hand in that human gesture of partnership. Friends, collaborators, bridge builders. He took her hand, all of those. They stood together in the garden as the light phase shifted, plants around them adjusting their glow in response. James realized that his compliment about her eyes had opened a door to understanding that transcended anything he'd imagined when he spoke those simple words. Because beauty, he'd learned, wasn't just about what was visible. It was about what was real, what was honest, what was courageous enough to be truly seen. Amara had shown him that truth written in living light, and in doing so had demonstrated that the prettiest things often lie beneath surface appearances, waiting for someone genuine enough to see them. Some beauty requires honesty to perceive. Some truths require trust to reveal. And sometimes, a simple compliment about someone's eyes can open doors to understanding that reshapes entire worlds. The story concludes 3 months later with James and Amara still working together as bridge builders between their species. Their partnership has become model for human-luminary relations, with cultural exchange programs now including education about emotional language differences. James is known among Luminari as the human who sees beyond surface, who learned their hidden language and uses that knowledge to create understanding. Among humans, he's the diplomat who solved the impossible negotiation through genuine connection rather than strategic manipulation. And occasionally, in private moments of darkness, Amara still shows him her patterns, sharing emotional truths that words can't capture. Each time, he marvels at the beauty of honesty made visible.